This Sunday in Colombia, voters will elect a new president to replace Juan Manuel Santos, who forged a controversial peace accord 18 months ago that ended more than 50 years of war. He struck that deal with the largest rebel group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, known as the FARC. As part of the deal, FARC members have given up their guns to pursue politics. They are still known as the FARC, but that now means Common Alternative Revolutionary Force, and they've chosen a new symbol, a rose. However, as special correspondent Nadja Drost and videographer Bruno Federico report, with the support of the Pulitzer Center on crisis reporting, the hard road to peace in Colombia is having deadly side effects.
In southern Bogotá, a scene in March that was unthinkable until recently. Former FARC rebels running for legislative office.
We're at a historic moment and we can't let it go. That victory is what we need for the peace agreement to be fulfilled.
One of the rebel negotiators of the fraught peace deal with Colombia's government, Victoria Sandino, has kept her nom de guerre as she enters a new political battle. The FARC agreed to lay down arms in exchange for being able to participate in politics. Their campaign was a test of the peace process and also a real-time barometer of just how ready the Colombian public is to accept them as legal political actors. On election day, when the FARC made its first appearance on the ballot, it was a historic moment, but not necessarily celebrated by voters.
It's the cost of peace to have them there doing politics instead of them being in the mountains killing people.
The FARC ended up getting a mere 0.35% of the vote, and even though the peace deal guarantees the FARC 10 seats in Congress, Sandino was, regardless, disappointed their poor results didn't help legitimize that presence.
Of course we would have liked to have gotten more votes, but we knew we were starting with nothing.
Despite their poor showing, the FARC's transformation from armed group to political party has been one of the most evident results of the peace process. But many of the legislative reforms called for by the peace accords have not materialized, obstructed by a Congress largely hostile to the deal and which has blocked or delayed the required legislative changes. Jean Arnaud is head of the UN verification mission in Colombia, tasked with monitoring the peace deal.
The process was too unpopular, in a way, to allow the president that drove it to, at the same time, drive that enormous effort that is investing major resources, money, effort into changing the situation.
The peace accords are designed to address deep-seated problems and inequalities in the countryside and within marginalized communities that drove and perpetuated the conflict. They aim to resolve land issues, bring rural development, and fight narco-trafficking with promises of subsidies and training programs for farmers to switch from growing coca, the raw material in cocaine, to alternative crops. Colombia's High Commissioner for Peace, Rodrigo Rivera, says the government has already fulfilled nearly 20% of its peace commitments.
We are trying to go faster and better in this process. It is not an easy task, but the first year has been dedicated almost totally to lay down the foundation of this building.
Ariel Avila of the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation says slow progress could jeopardize the possibility of peace.
The problem is that if we don't build rural roads for peasants, if we don't formalize property, if we don't create productive projects for the people, that population will have no other option than the illegal economy, cultivating coca leaves to make cocaine or illegal mining. So in 10 years, we're going to see a new wave of violence.
But it would seem that deadly future is now. Many areas of the country, mostly those once under FARC control, have been hit with new waves of violence. And in a morbid irony, it's affecting those the peace deal was supposed to make safer. Activists and social leaders have historically been targets in Colombia's violence. But since the peace deal signing, they're suffering a surge of threats and murders. According to the United Nations, 121 were murdered last year, double from the year before. Almost half of those killed were working on implementing the peace accords. The numbers continue to climb, especially in coca-growing areas, like the northern state of Córdoba, a long-time drug trafficking corridor used by guerrillas, paramilitary groups, and drug gangs. Luis Suarez, a leader of a peasant association, took us to his hometown of about 10,000 inhabitants, San José de Urré.
There's been at least 6 assassinations reported this year.
Suarez has 2 bodyguards assigned to him by a government protection program following a death threat a year ago. Suarez's group had been organizing families ready to abandon their coca bushes and join the government program to grow alternative crops, when one member was warned by an armed group to stop his work. Then he was murdered. Then Suarez got a call with instructions to drop his work.
They used heavy words. We're going to fill you with bullets. We're going to kill you. Then they asked me if they had made themselves clear, and I said yes. They hung up.
Violence has dropped in many parts of Colombia following the peace process. But where the FARC once ruled, paramilitary and drug trafficking groups have rushed in to fill the power vacuum.
The FARC dropped their arms, and the conflict hasn't ended here. That's why we don't call this post-conflict. We call it post-accord.
Upriver from here, fighting between armed groups over territory and vast coca crops has intensified over the last few months. Locals from some of the more isolated hamlets have told us of almost daily combat. Violence from outlying hamlets has displaced hundreds of people to San José de Urré. Many have moved in with town residents, like Bellarmino Miguel Vargas, who's living with his pregnant wife in a plastic-sheeted extension of a home. Vargas and his brother Antonio had joined the government's program to substitute illicit crops. His brother was eradicating the last of his coca plants when 2 men appeared in the field.
One took out a revolver and shot at my brother, and my brother, down on his knees, opened up his arms and prayed to God, gave himself up to God. They finished him off with 7 bullets.
Vargas says the message of the drug gangs is clear.
If you eradicate, we'll kill you. Nobody pulls out even 1 bush because they'll die.
The UN's Arnaud says the cartels saw an opportunity when the FARC left.
Those cartels got busy very quickly trying to make sure that the exit of FARC from the battlefield would not entail a decrease in the quality, quantity, and timing of the coca business.
If peace will inhabit land vacated by the FARC largely depends on who will ultimately occupy them, the state or criminal groups. Following decades of absence, Rivera, the peace commissioner, knows the state needs to replace the authority of armed groups and bring in roads, schools, health, and rural development, but says that's a big challenge right now.
Because in those areas we still are fighting, and the priority is still national security priority. So the experience of the people in those areas are kind of, we don't see any peace here. Even we have had a very high challenges in terms of protecting social leaders in those areas.
As we were leaving the river, peasant leader Suarez received a message on his cell phone about a community leader and coca farmer in the neighboring state.
He disappeared in Puerto Valdivia on Tuesday, and there's the possibility he's been killed.
A couple days later, his body was found. Later that week, another 2 nearby community leaders were killed, raising the number of social leaders like these killed across the country this year to at least a chilling 50. From San José de Urré in Córdoba, Colombia, reporting with Bruno Federico, I'm Nadja Drost for the PBS NewsHour.